Welcome to a New Life podcast with Pamela Jean, where it's all about empowering women to empower more women. Get ready, friends, to create a new life. And here is your host, Pamela Jean.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to this week's episode of A New Life podcast. This is Pamela Jean, your host. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you have 1,000 things you could be doing right now, but thank you for spending some time on this podcast, and you will be so glad you did. I have a very special guest, someone who is not only inspirational, but a true entrepreneur, a survivor, someone extremely determined, and I can't wait for you to get to know her a little bit better. My guest today is Chinh Doan. I had the honor of meeting Chinh at a networking group not too long ago, although I followed her for many years, and you'll understand why after she comes onto the platform here. So Chinh, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here, and share with our audience a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Pamela. It's an honor to be here. When you asked me to join you, I was so excited. And it's always an amazing opportunity for me to get to know people and to share a little bit about me and hopefully inspire a few people. So my name is Chinh Doan. I'm 35 years old. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it's kind of interesting, my path here, because I am originally from Vietnam and I've lived in other states as well. And I do feel like Tulsa, Oklahoma is where I'm supposed to be. And it's been a blessing to be here, meeting wonderful people like Pamela and getting to know our business community, our small business community. We are small but mighty. I've learned that we're really big on helping each other grow and collaborating. I always say collaboration over competition. And so because of that, I'm able to do a lot of things that I've always dreamt about as a little girl. And now I get to live my dreams in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh, that's awesome. So the first time I met you, Chinh, was actually on air. You were on a local news station, and I've been watching you do the weekend show and other special reports over the years. And up until then, I just thought you were wonderful at the role. And I was sad to hear that you were leaving the role until I heard what you were all going to do. I would love for you to share your backstory, Chinh. I think it's such an inspiration of where you came from in Vietnam, how you ended up in Tulsa. And if you would share a bit about your story, because everyone has a story. And I think it's so powerful when you have full understanding of a person's story. So if you could share your story, and then we'll chat about that a little and then dive into your businesses.
Absolutely. So I think everyone's biggest talent they have or their biggest asset is their story and their experiences that came with that story and what they do with that story. Obviously, some people it takes longer to overcome traumas and things like that before they start sharing their story. But for me, I've learned from a young age that I was meant to overcome these obstacles because God had a plan for me to share my story. And through my story, I've been able to connect with so many people and learn from people as well. So I was born in Vietnam in a very poor condition. Um, my parents did everything they could to make ends meet for us, but they had a lot of obstacles to overcome as well. Um, my father was an officer in the South Vietnamese military, so he fought alongside the U.S. troops, the Americans, during the Vietnam War. He was in the military for 15 years. My mother was a school teacher and she made ends meet by being an entrepreneur. And I'll get into, how her background and her experiences shaped me into who I am today as an entrepreneur later. But, my parents never gave up and they did everything they could to provide for our family. But, Vietnam was war torn from the Vietnam War, decades of war. And so everyone was very poor. And, unemployment rates were high and everyone really was just trying their best. And my parents knew that if we stayed in Vietnam, I would have to drop out of school likely in fifth grade because in Vietnam, education's not free. You pay for schooling, books, uniforms, transportation, food, everything costs money. And so a lot of people, if they're poor, education is the first thing to go because they need to help their family provide, put food on the table. And my parents are a lot older, so I knew that they wouldn't be able to work very long. And in Vietnam, there's not, Social Security, retirement, 401k, and things like that. So I knew that our family would need to make dramatic changes to be able to really live. And because my father was a prisoner of war for 10 years, after he was, after the fall of Saigon, which this year marks the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. April 30th, 1975 was the official end to the Vietnam War. And that was when people like my father, who were considered former enemies to the new government because he was an ally to the US and fought against North Vietnam, were captured and they were sent to prison. And so my father was in prison for 10 years. And when he got out of prison, he could not find a job. There was a lot of prejudice against people like my father and persecution. So he was not even considered safe in his own country. So, because of that, the US government granted my father refugee status to be able to move from Vietnam to the United States to be able to flee persecution and any possible violence toward him. So
Mhm.
we were ecstatic. My family and I were just so grateful for this opportunity to leave Vietnam. But of course, you're scared. You're scared because you don't know anyone in America, and you're scared because you don't know the language. You don't know, will I survive? What will the new life be like? And then to make things more complicated, there was some issues with paperwork because during the Vietnam War, people fled, people didn't keep documents and things like that. So there were some paperwork complications that prevented my mother from joining us. So my parents had to make the hardest decision any married couple would have to make, which is, do we separate our family? Meaning my mother would stay in Vietnam and my father would move to America and bring me with him because that's really the best thing to do for the family as far as getting, a new life for us. Or do we stay together as a family, but we would be in Vietnam in poverty and we don't know what would become of our lives? So my
Mhm.
parents made the hardest decision, and for the sake of my future, they decided that my father would take me to America. I was 4 years old. This was 1994. And my mother would stay behind and hope that one day, somehow, we would reunite. We had no idea how the immigration system was going to be. We didn't know how we would be able to pay for an attorney, legal fees, all these different things. We did not know. But what we did know was we had to have a better life. We had to take this opportunity. So I remember that day so vividly. This was in August of 1994. I was 4 years old, and we went to the airport. My dad and I had just one suitcase. We had no money. So I seriously get so emotional every time I think about that day because I think about the courage it took for my parents to make this huge leap of faith and the unconditional love they had for this little girl to put everything they've ever known aside and risk everything for the sake of my future. So, our family, we said our goodbyes at the airport. I remember kicking and screaming and crying, and I didn't understand why mom wasn't coming. But I held on to that memory so vividly, I think, because I didn't know when I would see my mom again. I didn't know if that was going to be our last memory together. I didn't know anything about the future. So We moved from Vietnam to Oklahoma City because we went through Catholic Charities, and Catholic Charities found us a church in Oklahoma City that would sponsor us. And it was a huge blessing because Oklahoma City has one of the largest Vietnamese populations, coming originally from the boat people from the fall of Saigon, and people fled on boats to flee persecution. And so a bunch of them moved to Oklahoma City and built this beautiful community where they help each other. So my father and I didn't have any family, but we had this small community who welcomed us and helped us with interpretation services, help my dad get his first driver's license, help us get a little apartment. And I truly came from humble beginnings. When we first moved here to America, my father, didn't have a degree, didn't have any trade skills, money, anything like that. So we were on welfare. We were on government food stamps and benefits until we could get our feet on the ground. And I remember living in Section 8 housing, and thinking we were so rich because I grew up in a hut in Vietnam made out of banana leaves and mud. And now we have four walls with a roof and air conditioning and indoor plumbing and water that we don't have to boil. And we had security guard at our apartment complex, not realizing it was not a gated community. It was because there was lots of violence in our neighborhood, and not realizing that we were even in Section 8 housing. I didn't even know what that was until I was a lot older, and didn't even know what the projects were until realizing I lived in the projects. But we were just so grateful that we had this apartment, and we had food stamps to get food, and I had wonderful neighbors, who were in the same boat as us. So nobody knew we were poor. We didn't know what poverty was. Um,
Well, I'm going to just pause you for a second, Chin, just because it's so much to digest. It's, we all sometimes feel like we don't have enough money. We don't have a big enough house. We don't have a nice enough this. What you speak of is a poverty that most most Americans cannot relate to. We cannot relate to that. When you think back to those days, how do those days impact you today? Like, what do you carry with you from the 4-year-old you that said goodbye to your mom and moved to very humble place to live? What do you carry with you?
I think that day I carried a sense of gratefulness that I didn't even realize was instilled in me, and unconditional love. And I think that's why my parents and I have such a strong relationship. And um, everyone always says you're an amazing daughter, and I've always thought I can't imagine not being the best I can be for my parents, because they were the best they can be for me.
Mm,
And the gratefulness is still to this day, because again, you don't realize how much you have until it's gone. So like, you don't realize how much you need a mom at a young age until you can't have her anymore.
mm,
You're half a world away from her. And then
right.
I just remember being grateful for everything we were given, even when we were poor, like living in a hut in Vietnam. And our transportation was my dad's bicycle. So he used a regular bicycle, and he would pedal me and my mom around. That was our transportation to get anywhere. So like I didn't even know what a car, like getting into a car, was until we moved to America. And I think some agency helped us find a beat down car. And that was our first car. My dad got his license, and we thought we were rich because we had a car.
Mm. And you were, I think, I think what's so interesting is that wealth and success doesn't equal happiness.
Correct.
It doesn't, just because you've reached a certain status or you have a certain job title or you have X number of dollars in the bank, that doesn't guarantee happiness.
Correct.
Being rich and wealthy has nothing to do with anything that's monetary at all. It has everything to do with who you love and who loves you.
Absolutely. And that was the thing. We were poor in money and material things, but we were very rich in love. I can't imagine a richer love than what my parents did for us.
Wow. And thank you to your dad for his service, because he served our country as well. He served America. So thank you for your service to your father. That is so important to remember, and what he sacrificed for our country, for your country, for America, when your father was in the military and risked so much.
Thank you. And he was very proud of his service, despite, of course, he was heartbroken that his country was torn apart. And obviously, he lost a lot of fellow brothers in the war. And, um, seeing the end of the war was heartbreaking for him. But to the day that he died, he was so proud to be a Vietnam vet and so proud to live in America. And he never was. People asked all the time if he was ever upset that Americans got involved and things like that. He said absolutely not. He said that he felt like Americans did the right thing by trying to prevent communism from spreading, and he was proud to serve alongside Americans and proud to live in America.
Well, I'm so grateful and happy for your family that you found your way here, truly. So, and especially in Oklahoma, because there's a lot of places in America that you could have ended up, and what a beautiful place to land, but Oklahoma.
Absolutely. It was where we were supposed to be.
I agree, and God has His hand in everything. And if we just pause long enough to realize it, He truly has His hand in everything. So let's pick up where you left off. You were talking about having your first car, and when did you? How did you just determine your education path? Where did you end up going to college? What did that look like for you? Once you got here at 4, you had to learn a new language. You had so much that you had to get caught up on. What was that like for you?
So I grew up very quickly, obviously, being an only child, living with my father, and then being a girl. Um, I was his interpretation. So at the age of 4 and 5, I was interpreting for our family, helping pay bills and things like that. So my father got his first job was he was a custodian for a newspaper in Oklahoma City. And I thought that my father was a journalist because he worked at a newspaper. So I would tell the neighborhood kids, my dad's a journalist and I want to become a journalist just like my dad. And back then, there were not very many options as far as watching TV. We had one TV, and back then there was not live streaming and or streaming services and cable and things like that. So we had only a couple of channels, and um, we loved watching TV news. And the reason why is because TV news, it makes it, the goal is to make it understandable for all ages. So you have pictures that match with the words, and you try to use conversational language so that people would understand. And so, because of that, we learned English, and I loved it. And I noticed there were not very many people who looked like me on TV. And I thought, well, that would be cool if I got to be a role model and I got to show some little girl out there that she too could do this. So I made it basically a goal at the age of 7 that I would become a journalist and would love to work on TV. So that's always been my goal. And around the age of 10, I went into foster care. My father could no longer take care of me. And he also ended up being badly hurt in a car accident, which I don't even call it a car accident. It's actually he was walking and he got hit by a car, and it was a hit and run. So it was, that impacted my life dramatically because here I am halfway across the world without my mom, and now my father is in the hospital and doctors thought that he would never be able to walk again. And then now I'm in the foster care system. So all of that happening at once, but I'm very grateful that I had probably the best foster care experience anyone could have. And that's because God had all of these plans for me. I was meant to live with my Sunday school teacher. Her name is Donna, and she became my permanent foster placement and the best thing to ever happen to our family. She has been an amazing additional mother to me, and she's educated. She had her master's degree, and she's an amazing Catholic woman. And I didn't even have to leave my church because she was my Sunday school teacher. So moving in with her, I got to stay in my church community, stay in my Oklahoma City community, and still got to spend time with my dad. We would spend time together as a family. And my father did eventually recover, and he was able to eventually walk with a walker. So he's overcome many, many miracles, right? Including surviving being shot during his military experience, to surviving 10 years of being a prisoner of war, getting hit by a car, and he later went on to survive several strokes and health issues. Um, but my foster family became my family. My foster mother never had children, never was married, so I was her priority. And to this day, we talk every day. We're best friends. She is a news junkie, so I really ended up in the right home.
Mm.
And yeah, I graduated from Putnam City High School in Oklahoma City, and I graduated with honors. I graduated as the student body president, so I was able to graduate by giving my graduation speech, and my father was there, my foster family was there, and it was one of the biggest highlights of my life. And I went on to the University of Oklahoma to study journalism, the Gaylord College of Journalism and Mass Communication, and I studied Spanish and international studies as well. I had big dreams of becoming an international correspondent. I love traveling, I love speaking multiple languages, so I wanted to be an international storyteller. However, plans changed because I was able to sponsor my mother over. It took 18 years.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
yes, and the immigration system, to be, which means you have to be at least 18 years old, go through the process, take the test, and then you also have to be at least 21 years old. So when I was 18, I became a naturalized citizen right before I started college. And then I became eligible when I was 21 years old. Now, I worked with Catholic Charities, so it came back full circle. I worked with Catholic
Mm.
Charities to sponsor my mother over. And I had some big goals because usually the process can take 2 to 4 years. But from the age of 21, from the day that I turned 21 to the day that I would graduate from the University of Oklahoma, was about 4 months. I knew it was a big, hefty goal, but I wanted to be able to sponsor my mother over and have her land in Oklahoma in time to see me graduate, for my mom and my dad and my foster family to be together and to see all of their hard work and sacrifices and the result of that. So I worked closely with my lawmakers and the president of the University of Oklahoma at the time, the late David L. Boren, who was a mentor of mine and an incredible support. And because he was a former Oklahoma governor, a former U.S. senator, he had a lot of pull. So, between all of these wonderful people who wrote letters to the U.S. Embassy and lots of prayers and lots of support, I was able to get my mother's visa approved in time for me to go to Vietnam the week before my college graduation, help my mom pack up her life, say goodbye to all of her family members, and move to Oklahoma City. So the week of my college graduation slash finals week, I
Jeez.
landed at the Oklahoma City airport with my mom, and at the airport were my dad, my foster family, OU cheerleaders, even the mascot, my sorority sisters, my friends and teachers from elementary, all of these wonderful people who've shaped my life and cheered me on during this big journey, this big goal, were there to welcome my mom. We had the media there, all of those things. And so that was the beginning of our family being reunited.
What
Was
was that initial reunion like for you, Chin,
it
when
was
you went to Vietnam to get her and to pack her up and to say all of those goodbyes? What was that first reunion like when you landed in Vietnam and saw her after so many years?
it was overwhelming and emotional and surreal. Like I couldn't believe that everything that our family had been praying for, saving for, working toward, it was coming true. Like I was like, I don't believe this. This
Like,
is
this is really happening.
happening. And yeah, so I mean, our family, it was so hard, like to say goodbye to our family. But my mom will always say that it was absolutely something she's always wanted to do. And I'm her baby, and she always wanted to be there for me. And since she couldn't all those years, like, this we're making up for lost time. And yeah, landing at the airport and seeing my dad, and he was holding these yellow roses for my mom.
Mm.
He was able to even like spin her around, and they did a little dance in the middle of the airport,
Oh my gosh.
and everybody was surrounding us and cheering us on and laughing hysterically because here's this precious old couple dancing in the middle of the airport. It was so cute, and then people brought them OU shirts, so they were wearing OU shirts. And yeah, look us up,
Oh,
look up Chinh Doan American Dream, and there are lots of articles and videos about our family. And so, yeah, after that, I got my parents a little apartment, and I went to New York to um, do a fellowship at CBS News in New York City. And so it was nice for them to have some alone time together while I was in New York. And then when I came back from New York, I got my first full-time TV news reporting job in Waco, Texas, at a CBS station there. And my parents have always traveled with me and lived with me because, again, we're making up for lost time, and I adore them. And so after New York, or after Waco, Texas, I went to work in Omaha, Nebraska, at an ABC station there, and I loved my time in Omaha, Nebraska. Um, but it was really cold, and
yes, that is a true statement.
that is a true statement. And after almost 7 years, we decided to move where it would be warmer, and move where we already knew that we had an amazing community. And so, um, an opportunity at Channel 6 in Tulsa came up, and I was like, you know what? I've been to Tulsa before. I like it there, and it's Oklahoma,
And it's
and
warmer.
it's warmer, and it's a good opportunity. So we moved to Tulsa in January of 2020. Good
Oh,
times. Great
what? Oh
time to
my
start a new
God.
life, new job, new house, new everything, right?
Wow. I did not realize it was 2020.
Yes. But you know what? I know 2020 was so hard on so many people, losing so many lives and losing their businesses, their livelihood, and all that. I'm grateful that 2020 actually brought a lot of new life for me, including obviously my new job, but also like I bought my first home, our family's
Oh.
first home. I'm the first in my family to own a home. Um,
Mm.
so that little girl who grew up in a hut finally got herself a home, and I adopted my first dog, and
Oh my gosh.
I met my now husband. Like all of these
Yeah.
wonderful things came out of 2020, and
I'm not surprised, Chin, that because I think you have a level of gratitude that is absolutely woven in every fiber of your being. If you can find gratitude in the 4-year-old who had to leave her mother and travel halfway around the world. If you can find gratitude in that, you will absolutely find gratitude in experiencing 2020.
Thank you. Yeah, it was
I'm
tough.
just not surprised because that's your woven. It's woven into who you are.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Wow. Okay. So that's when I guess I first got to know you was on Channel 6 News. That's okay. I didn't realize I didn't correlate that with 2020, but I guess that's when I got to know you. And I thought you were such a breath of fresh air because I didn't know you personally at the time. Just, they have someone new. And I thought you were so good. And, I could tell that every story meant something to you. It wasn't just doing a job for you, but you were telling a story with everything you reported on.
Thank you. And I try to come with that attitude with everything I do, not just TV or just with my job, even volunteer work or if I tell someone I'm going to do something, I want to be able to do it in a way that would make me proud and also make them feel appreciated.
Excellent. So I know recently, Chin, you have stepped away from your career as a journalist and a storyteller. Let's dive into your entrepreneurial journey because I get a little bit exhausted when I hear about all of your businesses.
Yes, so after 13 years working in television, my family and I, along with the advice from my mentors, we decided that this is a season of my life in which I want to focus on my family. And so I decided to step away from TV news. And my husband and I have been married for about a year and a half. And we want to try to start a family soon. And, in TV news, I worked every weekend for 13 years, most holidays and a lot of nights too, which is not to me conducive to being a mom. And I want to be a present mom and a present wife and a present daughter. So I thought this was the best thing, which is to step away. And so far, it seems to be wonderful. I'm very grateful for the transition. So
Awesome.
immediately after leaving TV news, I started Chinh Doan Marketing and Media LLC. So what I do is I help people, businesses, and nonprofits shape their stories and share their stories. So what I do is I meet with my clients. We create a list of goals, we create a list of timelines, and then we figure out what is best to tell their stories. Is it a story on TV? Is it a segment on radio? Is it an article in a newspaper? Is it a page in a magazine? Is it an opportunity to go on a podcast like this? Is it an opportunity to get in front of people and be a speaker or an expert of some sort? Is it a mixture of kind of a little bit of everything? And we kind of map out their plan. And I work as, in addition to their marketing strategist, I am also their business coach and their agent. So we figure out how to market and tell their stories in a way that connects with their ideal client and that it resonates with people. As
Mm.
you know, people do businesses with people they know, like, and trust. So, in order for people to know you, like you, and trust you, they have to know your story. What makes you stand out is your story, it's your why. So, I've been very grateful in that I've been able to transition slowly into this role. And my clients are finding success, and I'm finding a lot of joy and reward out of this. I feel fulfilled. Of course, anybody who's worked in something for a long time, you worry about the what ifs. Like, what if this doesn't fulfill me? What if I'm not good at it? What if I made a mistake and leaving something I've known, I've liked? I'm human. I have doubts sometimes, and I did have those doubts, but I actually have never yet woken up and thought that I made the wrong decision by putting my family first and taking a break from something, knowing that I could always go back if I wanted to, But I'm very grateful that the marketing transition has gone really well, and I'm loving what I'm doing, and it's fun that I'm learning new things too, Since this is new to me in a way. It's been nice connecting with people, and it's been awesome going back to the whole collaboration over competition thing. Some of my partners are actually other marketing agencies that have hired me on to be their consultant because I do something kind of unique, and especially with recent experience and TV news and still having lots of contacts at all the different TV stations, both at a local and national level, I'm able to provide something that most agencies don't have. And so it's been great partnering with agencies to help their clients tell their stories as well.
Well, I couldn't think of anyone more qualified than you, Chin, to bring the storytelling aspect into marketing instead of just we're marketing a product, we're marketing a business. You're marketing people's products through their story, which is a different angle that most marketing companies don't really take that approach. I think it's a breath of fresh air as far as an approach, but also you have a plethora of contacts which other people just simply don't have because of your history. Now, if someone is interested in hiring you, Chin, what is the best way for them to reach out to you if they're looking for the marketing services that you offer?
Yeah, they can go to chindoan.com and then I have my information there.
Perfect. That's perfect. So I know that you're new to the entrepreneurial world, being self-employed. That's tricky. I started a self-employment journey when I was 21 years old, and it was tricky then, and it still is because I help businesses as well reach their goals and establish good foundations and business practices. What is a current pain point that you have experienced as you're developing and growing your company?
I think part of it is time management and making your boundaries known, right?
Mm,
I think growing up, I've always been such a people pleaser. I want to make everyone happy. I don't want to let anybody down. But I've learned that in order for me to be a good wife, mother, daughter, and things like that, I do have to have boundaries between personal and business and what are my hours and how quickly I'm going to respond to something. Before, I would respond immediately and just put everything else aside if somebody called or texted me. And now I have to think, okay, I've set business hours and this is outside of my business hours and it's not an emergency. I can get back to another day. But that's something I had to train myself. I've had conversations with my husband, like we both have to remember to put our phones somewhere else while we're having dinner together. you know and things
yes.
like that,
Yes.
maybe back then 10, 15 years ago wasn't much of an issue because people were not so easily accessible, right? Now
Right.
through cell phone and social media, people feel like they can contact you any time of day. I've had clients contact me at 3 a.m., at 5 a.m., all of these different times. And before I would read it, like
Right.
nobody could me during that time. You know what I mean?
Chindo never sleeps. She'll always
Right.
answer your your text.
Yes. And I had to I had to learn to set my boundaries. And the next day I would say, hey, thank you for your patience. You texted me during, outside of business hours, but I'm ready to help you now. And, people don't get
Mm,
upset when you respond in a gracious way like that.
right.
Then they realize, okay, those are her boundaries and that's okay.
Right. I
I feel
think
like,
one of the biggest things that I learned in that vein as well, I think when you're newly starting a business, you're functioning from a place of desperation that
absolutely.
I've got to get, I need another client for next month. I need a client for next week. I need another client. So you're making business decisions from a framework of desperation. And that's where new business owners and new entrepreneurs kind of shoot themselves in the foot. If every
Absolutely.
decision you make comes from a place of abundance and logic and clarity, you're not going to make those missteps. And communication with your clients is the biggest key to say, hey, Chin, my business office hours, my accessible hours are from 8 until 5 o'clock. If I don't answer you during the day, that means I'm with another client. I'm not ignoring you. I'll get to you as soon as I possibly can. If it's an emergency, let me know and I'll bump you up in the priority list. Otherwise, you might hear from me tomorrow. As long as you let your clients know they're fine. But it's
Right.
just the unknown that creates some insecurity and creates some tension and just creates a little bit of mistrust that they just don't quite trust that you're going to follow through.
Absolutely. Yep, you're right.
Yes. So I guess if you're listening and you're a new entrepreneur or even an entrepreneur that's been at it a while, making decisions out of desperation will never, ever serve you. Ever. So step away from that as quickly as you can and work on making decisions with an abundant mindset that will always, always serve you well. You're not going to take on a client that really isn't your client to have because obviously, Chin, not everyone that meets with you is your client. And that's okay. Not everyone who meets with me is my client, and that's okay. That's why you have a network of other coaches that you can say, you know what, I'm not the right person for you, but I know someone who is, and you can give a good referral to someone else.
Absolutely. And I've had to learn that the hard way too, that like just like they are choosing me to do business with, I'm choosing whether I want them as a client.
Correct.
So if they're not
Again,
understanding of your boundaries, then
yes.
they're not your client.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes people want help, but they don't want to do the work. And if I have, I have some clients from time to time that they really, really want their life to change, but they're just not willing to do the work. And there's lots of excuses and lots of reasons why they're just not willing to trust the process and do the work. That would not be someone that is coachable. So they may need to find other ways of getting over certain hurdles and be ready to be coached. And not everybody is. And that's okay because we're all on a different journey.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to do those discovery calls to see
Yes.
whether you are on the same page. Yeah, I've had to learn even in my new marketing endeavors that, when I'm talking to them about what are your goals and what are you willing to do to get to those goals. And when those things don't match, I just have to say, I don't think my services will be able to solve the problems for you.
Right. Right. Well, and you're doing someone a favor by being honest and saying, here are the metrics that would need to change for us to be able to work together. If those change, then let's have another conversation. And that's great because you don't want to take someone's money knowing that you're not going to be able to serve them well.
Correct. Yes. Yes. It's definitely a two-way street. I would need to know what their goals are and see whether it's going to work, and they would have to put in the work.
Yes,
So
exactly. And be willing to be coached and trust the process and work really, really hard and do some things that they've never had to do before. Because you come for coaching and help and guidance because you don't know how to get where you want to go. And you have to let go of your old habits, your old ways, because clearly if those were working, you wouldn't be asking for help. And sometimes people have a hard time letting go of the things that they may not be serving them, but they are comfortable and they have to really work at just being super uncomfortable.
yes, absolutely. And another thing I would say is, we cannot do everything. And so I always say if it's something that you don't enjoy doing and you're also not good at, let the professionals do that and use your time to do something that brings you joy or brings you an income.
Mm, that's so good. That is so, so good. Okay, we are, I'm going to try to wrap it up. I could literally talk to you for probably 2 whole hours, Chin, but I know we both have life and things to do. I want to just get a few more questions in before we land the plane, if you will.
Sure.
What is one thing in the world that no one knows about you?
See, that's a hard one because I am a pretty much what you see is what you get. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm very open about things. But I think something that people might forget about me is I'm human and I have doubts and fears just like everyone else. And how I overcome those is I pretty much am making sure that I'm hyping myself up and making sure I'm surrounding myself with good people who remind me of my worth. And they help remind me that it's okay to have a bad day. Most of the time I go 24/7 and I can juggle a lot. But sometimes my husband will be like, honey, I think you should sleep in today. And I'm like, but all these things I have to do. He's like, it's okay, those things can wait. I think you should sleep in today. And guess what? I did that the other day. And the world didn't fall apart. Everything was okay.
And
And now,
everything was okay.
yes, I think I think it's important for us to constantly be reevaluating ourselves, where our strengths, where our weaknesses. And I know what mine are, and I make sure that people close to me know those things too, so they can help remind me to take care of myself and encourage me. Because I think
Mm,
sometimes, especially if you're someone who's so used to being in the spotlight or so used to what people might think as like being successful, that you feel like you have to constantly be that facade all the time, and that you don't give yourself room to have grace and room to, make mistakes and room to have errors. I don't like the
mm,
word failure. I don't ever use that word, but I
mhm,
think it's okay to not be successful all the time. It's okay to
mhm.
try things. It didn't work out. That's okay. But I think it's hard for us um, to think that sometimes. And so we need to have people remind us that, like, it's okay. You're still awesome. I still love you. And how can I help you move on?
Well, I think failure is part of the process. It's necessary. You
Correct.
have to fail. You don't get success without failure. The one doesn't come without the other. And
Right.
failure isn't even actually failure. It's lessons. It's teaching. It's
Correct.
it's something you have to. It just guides you. Failure is your guide to the next step. It points the direction. It helps you know that, okay, take a right here. You go left here. Keep going straight. It helps you know where to go. So I identify failure similarly to you because it's just simply part of the process. If I didn't have failure, I won't have my success.
Right.
And that's pretty easy. So my last question for you, Chin, is what advice would you give entrepreneurs or dreamers standing in their way of getting started?
I would say make a list of your goals, prioritize them, and then think of who is it that has successfully done those things? Who is it that could be your mentor? And who is it that could be your running buddy? And those are not necessarily the same things. A running buddy and a mentor aren't necessarily the same thing. They could be. And make sure that you use them as your accountability partner. Um, I think I've met a lot of people who have all these big dreams and things like that, but they never put pen to paper. And then they don't tell people about their dreams and their goals. So they don't have anybody to hold them accountable, but also anybody to think of them when those opportunities arise, right? Had I not told a few of my mentors of what I was doing, why I was leaving news, and what I wanted to do, I wouldn't have had a couple people introduce me to marketing agencies that then took me on as their consulting partner. Like,
Mm.
think about that. If I just kept these goals to myself because I was scared of what people thought of me or what if I fail and things like that, I wouldn't have landed these opportunities to collaborate and have all of essentially these new mentors who have been in marketing for years.
That's excellent. That's excellent, excellent advice. So before we wrap up, Chin, I would love for you to share your other businesses because your marketing business is just one of multiple. So share your other businesses as well as the contact information once again, please, before we close it out.
Sure. So, in addition to my marketing business, I'm also a makeup artist. So, I work a lot with photographers to do makeup for their clients. And I also do, makeup for weddings, special events, proms. I teach classes in groups and one-on-ones. And then I also run my mom's housekeeping business. We do commercial and residential move-ins, move-outs, Airbnbs. We work a lot with realtors who want to have their house showings the best they can be by having a cleaning. And then I also help my husband with his scheduling for his DJ and salsa lesson services. So he's a DJ and a salsa instructor. So I book his services for everything from corporate galas to nonprofit fundraisers to weddings, house parties, special events, and things like that. So we're both in the wedding industry and housing industry because we have some rental properties as well. So we just kind of do a little bit of everything.
So now I'm exhausted, and I know everyone listening is exhausted too. But Chin, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I would love to have you back sometime.
Yes, I would love.
Um, I seriously would love to have you back and take deeper dives into smaller segments, because you have so much that we could cover. And I love hearing your story, your 4-year-old little girl story to going to OU, and how all of your connections have just made you who you are today. And I'm just going to throw this out here. You absolutely have to have a Netflix series on the story of your life. I'm not even kidding. It would be so interesting and phenomenal and inspirational. And I would love to plant that seed and throw that out into the world, because I think it's necessary and I think it would be valuable to anyone who would watch it.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Absolutely. Oh, okay, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed Chin as much as I did. And I'm definitely going to have her back and take some deeper dives into her marketing business, as well as her makeup business and all of the things that she's doing, because it's exhausting, right? Being a business owner. And you can do this. If you're listening and you're on the fence of whether to start a business or your business isn't going well, you can do this. Don't give up. There's so many great sources out there for information and inspiration. You just have to reach out and find them. But make it a great day. Thank you again for joining us, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for joining us today on A New Life podcast. We will see you next time.